Everybody agrees we're in Minchas Chinuch, the midst of Kiddush, Shabbos Kiddush, that everybody agrees that Kiddush Friday night is a Torah obligation. To speak about the praiseworthiness of the day, the specialness of that day, on a cup of wine. Now, if it's Kiddush is on Shabbos, so we understand, if you say Kiddush after nightfall, it's not a problem. You're saying Kiddush on Shabbos. But if you say Kiddush before sundown, because you accepted Shabbos early, such as the summertime period, how does one fulfill this obligation of Kiddush before nightfall if Shabbos hasn't yet begun? So what's the only answer? That the Torah allows us to add to the Shabbos, to bring in Shabbos early. And when you bring in Shabbos early, since you're restricted to the same restrictions of Shabbos, you're saying Kiddush on Shabbos, although it's before nightfall. But the problem is, most earlier commentators are of the opinion that the added time we add before Shabbos is not recognized by the Torah as Shabbos. It's purely a rabbinic law. It's not a Torah law. So if that's the case, when you say Kiddush before Shabbos actually begins, means before nightfall, how does one fulfill this Torah obligation if in fact you're saying it before Shabbos begins? Okay, this is a difficulty. It's interesting. We light Hanukkah lights when? At nighttime, to publicize the miracle of Hanukkah. What happens? What does one do Friday afternoon? You have to light the lights 8 days. You can't light the Hanukkah lights Friday night because it's Shabbos, prohibition of kindling. So what do? We light it before we light Shabbos candles. Before then, it's even before you accept the Shabbos. So how could the lighting during the daytime period be considered like you lit the candles for the nighttime, for Friday night? You lit it during the daytime, and we rule halachically that what is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is to kindle. The kindling is the mitzvah. It's not burning into the night. When you kindle, you have to leave enough oil that you burn into the nighttime. So Friday night, when we kindle Friday during the daytime, before we light Shabbos candles, you have enough oil in that receptacle that it will burn a half an hour into the nightfall. But when do you light it? You light it during the daytime. So how could the lighting of Friday afternoon be considered like you lit it at nighttime? Similar question. Now, when you light Hanukkah candles, if you light it before too early, you cannot light it more than earlier than 10 3/4 hours into the day. Let's say you want to light it at 12 o'clock noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not valid. It's only if it's during the latter part of the afternoon. The latter part of the afternoon identifies with the nighttime. Only therefore, it's considered as if you lit it at nighttime. It's best to light at nighttime, but if you can't light at nighttime, because Friday night is Shabbos, you light within this time period, which is about an hour and a quarter before sundown. That's when you light it. If you light it then, it's like you lit it at nighttime. When you say Kiddush, if you say the Kiddush after what we call Plaga Mincha, after its period of time, that period of time already identifies with the nighttime. And since if you say Kiddush during that time, you do fulfill the obligation of Kiddush, although you didn't accept Shabbos yet. In reality, it's not Shabbos. That period of time identifies with the nighttime period, and as a result of that, you fulfill your obligation of Kiddush. That's what we're discussing right now. We're holding Ches. Rambam Kan.
Can I just ask one quick question on the Hanukkah? Even though I know they're different shitas, but isn't like the Vilna Gaon shita that he lights right at the shkia, even though that's Ben Hashmashos and it's not considered Lila, but the Gaon lights earlier, or no?
Yeah, but Friday afternoon, you're definitely right. Way before Ben Hashmashos.
Way before, correct. I understand.
So how could that lighting being on Friday, definitely on Friday, but yet that lighting it contributes to the Friday night lighting, as if you lit it Friday night.
As if you lit, okay.
Okay. So according to the Rambam says, the Yochalodin Lakadish Bojom, Ulavnim Bojom. Person's able to say Kiddush when it's still daylight and you're able to say Havdalah, could you imagine? Havdalah Shabbos afternoon. Shabbos is not over yet. But if a person says Havdalah after a certain period in the afternoon, one does not have to say Havdalah Saturday night. Humishas Brochus Chav Zayin days, Ayin Borachayim, Simon Reish Samach Zayin days. This is based on the Gemara and it's ruled in the Shulchan Aruch. Hainu the Plaga Midcha ve'elech. Plaga Midcha, that's I told you, towards the latter part of the daytime. I feel Kodem Tosef Shabbos, even before the 18 minutes. I'm Mogan Avram, Sham Sifkot Aleph, B'Shem Mordechai Megillah, B'Shem Rabbeinu Tuvia, Kevin Drabon Chayiv, since rabbinically you're obligated during that time. Yotzi after Raisa. What is Yotzi, even the Torah obligation? Mogan Avram, Hikshal said, Mogan Avram is the commentator Shulchan Aruch asks, Aram Sover, the Tosa Shabbos Leka Klal, I'm per Kal, hey, Mishabbos Halacha Gimel. The Rambam says there's no such thing as an obligation of Tosef Shabbos. You only have to add to Yom Kippur. You have to start Yom Kippur earlier. The Rambam rules there's no mitzvah to add to the Shabbos. Perk out Mishisis Oser, Achatam Shlu Kosev Kan Dischiru Zui Kin Soso Vitzioso. The mitzvah of acknowledging Shabbos is at the entry and when it concludes. So what's the entry? Does it mean literally on Shabbos? No, it means before. So as long as we identify that period of time as the entry period, it's enough. At the exit period, what's the exit? Does it mean Shabbos has to be over or when we're approaching the end of Shabbos? So as long as it's, you say Havdalah after Plaga Mincha, which is 10 3/4 hours into the day, although it's still Shabbos, you're already acknowledging Shabbos about to end towards the end of Shabbos. And therefore, it's valid. It's considered Havdalah. Daito, da mitzvah kachi. According to Mogar Avraham, he explains what is the mitzvah. Mashkosa kimat, hainu mitlaka mincha ve'elech. Ayin sham barosh, brochis, v'tur, Beis Yosef, the Yeshovrim, the Makadish, and the Mavdil Ahalayla. However, the others say no, you can't say Kiddush till nighttime. According to the Rambam. Mogar Avraham says no. That the Rambam holds you could, because it's the entry of when you're entering into Shabbos and when you're exiting Shabbos. Now, there's a famous question which is asked it's a response written a few hundred years ago. What is the halacha? Somebody dies right before Shabbos, and the burial did not take place. The family members who are aveilim, the mourners before the actually interment in the ground. When Shabbos comes, how do they conduct themselves? As if nothing happened. They have all the obligations, Kiddush, davening, brachos, everything. The moment Motzoi Shabbos comes, where they're permitted to engage in creative work, activity, they're not permitted to do any mitzvah. Not permitted to say a bracha, not permitted to daven. One doesn't wear tefillin until the body's interred in the ground. It's called onein. Person's an onein. So until that period takes place, which is the burial, the person's not yet a mourner. He's not permitted to do a mitzvah. So what happens? Saturday night comes, one has an obligation to say Havdalah. But what happens when Saturday comes regarding this person? He's an onein. He's not permitted to say Havdalah. He cannot say Havdalah. So the question was posed, if factually you're able to say Havdalah on Shabbos, 10 3/4 hours into the day, then the person's not an onein, because he can't actually do any mlocha. He can't bury the person. So the question is, why wait till Saturday night where he's not able to say Havdalah? Because then he has to engage, he has to be preoccupied with the burial. Why let him say Havdalah in this situation here at Plaga Mincha, meaning 10 3/4 hours of the day, but it's still Shabbos. And since one fulfills the mitzvah post facto, when he says it at that time, like this is the game. He's able to say Havdalah, of course, without lighting a candle, but he's able to say the Havdalah, and he doesn't have to wait till after the burial to say the Havdalah. He could say it immediately. he could say it on Shabbos. That's the question which is asked. Okay, now, the answer which is given is this. When you say Havdalah in the afternoon, which Havdalah are you fulfilling? The obligation of the nighttime. The obligation is meant to be said after night. So if the obligation, but however, if you say it at the entry point, at the exit point, you're addressing the upcoming obligation. But if Motzoi Shabbos, Saturday night, the person has no obligation, you're not in the entry area about to do the mitzvah, because there's no mitzvah Saturday night. Every person could do the mitzvah of Motzoi Shabbos. So therefore, 10 to 3/4 into the day, you're already approaching the end of Shabbos. And the end of Shabbos, you have an obligation to Havdalah. Therefore, you could say Havdalah even then. But this person here, when he's approaching the end of Shabbos, he has no obligation to Havdalah. Because when Motzei Shabbos comes, he's an owning. Therefore, as a result of that, even if he says Havdalah, it has no value. Therefore, for him to say Havdalah, the obligation is only once the burial takes place, only then does he say the Havdalah. Now, what is adulthood according to Jewish law? When a person reaches 13, is he already an adult? Not necessarily. What happens if a person reaches 13, but he hasn't reached puberty? The person's 14. He hasn't reached puberty. He's not an adult. He's still considered a minor. An adult is years plus puberty. Puberty pre-13 means nothing. You need puberty with being 13. A situation, Friday night, the child is 13 years old. He doesn't reach puberty till Saturday morning. That's when the hairs grow long enough that it's considered puberty. So Friday night, he was a minor, although he's 13 years old. 11 o'clock Saturday morning, he's an adult because he's 13 plus puberty. He said Kiddush Friday night. So the Kiddush he said Friday night is what? As a minor. Now, when he reaches puberty, it's Shabbos, he has an obligation to say Kiddush as an adult. The Friday night Kiddush he said last night, does that cover his Torah obligation, which now he has a Torah obligation? So what would you say? Definitely not. Before we're speaking about the time, you're obligated on a Torah level. The question is, when you're saying it now, is it pre-time or it is within the time? Here we're talking about the person's not even obligated. So the Kiddush he said Friday night, he was not an adult. So if he was not an adult, the Kiddush said he was not obligated to say that Kiddush. Come Shabbos afternoon or Shabbos late morning, he reaches puberty, now he's an adult. So now he's obligated to say the Kiddush. Okay? The Moya Cotton, Bleo Shabbos, Shlo Hevi Shtei Saros. Ubiyom Shabbos Hevi Shtei Saros. Emlo Kiddush, Bleo Shabbos, Chayev bin HaTorah, Lakadosh B'yom HaShabbos. He Kiddush Hayom, Lami Torah Tashluminu. Lamar. Keva Glochozi B'Lailo. Potter. Since at nighttime he has no obligation. Kamo Rio, Chagigo, Rakamitzi Kachi, Kamo Shizbar L'Kamon. Achem Kiddush B'Leil Shabbos. If he did say Kiddush Friday night, then he was only obligated on a rabbinical level. When you say Kiddush Friday night, why? The Kod Shigil L'Chinuch Chai Medivri Sofrim. A child that reaches an age that he could be educated, rabbinically, he has to perform the mitzvah. In B'chuyiv L'Kadosh B'yom Torah, Zetoli, hear this. Pieces. Does he have Torah obligation to say Kiddush during the daytime? Of course, the Kiddush he said Friday night was only rabbinical. Dasa Mordechai Shei Mogen Avrom, Plaga Mincha Api Shumin Drabonon, Kom Poter B'Kiddush Shabbos. His Plaga Mincha, which is only rabbinical, we see it as the next day, yet you're exempt from Kiddush of Shabbos. Ki Drabonon Poter Gam Mitzvah Min HaTorah. The way he's learning the Mordechai, that the rabbis, they can exempt you from a Torah mitzvah. Im Kein Gam Kan Potter. Achamogre Rabbi Hikshal said, But the Mogen of Ram had difficulty with that. Well, that's a Rambam Shekasavnim Kain, Ein Tam, Machmas, Achiv, Drabonon, Poter. It's not because it's a rabbinical, the rabbis, they could exempt you. Rak HaMitzvahi, Kachman Torah, to acknowledge Shabbos on the entry point. If you understand that that's why you could say it before Shabbos, has nothing to do rabbinical. If that's the case, the minor who's a minor, it's only a rabbinical obligation. Definitely, it's not going to cover a Torah obligation. Because Friday night it was only a rabbinical obligation. Now, 11 o'clock in the morning, Shabbos, it's Torah obligation. He did the mitzvah when he was exempt, and now he's obligated. One does a mitzvah when he's absolved, and he can't cover you when you're obligated. Over there, it's speaking about a person reaches a level of instability, and he hears the shofar or eats matzah, and then afterwards he gets stabilized. The eating of the matzah that he ate when he was in an unstable state has no value because he was considered incompetent when he ate the matzah. He's like a minor, incompetent. Now he has to eat the matzah again. Similar over here. Friday night, he's a minor because he hasn't reached puberty. He said the Kiddush, but it's the Kiddush of a minor because on the Torah level, he's not obligated. So we see if you're not obligated, it can't cover an obligation. I shab Turi Evan, Shabirish came. Acha Rambam, Atzmo Perkei Mikorm Pesach, Halacha Zayin. The Rambam writes in the laws regarding the Korm Pesach, Dem Kotten also Pesach Harishon, Min is Gadol Kotten Pesach Sheni. Niftar Mea Pesach Sheni. You hear this? A minor partakes of Pesach Rishon, which is the 14th and 15th night of Nisan, as a minor. And then before the second Pesach comes, meaning Pesach Sheni, which is the 14th of Iyar, he's an adult. He has no obligation to be Pesach Sheni. Although when he ate the first Pesach, he was only rabbinical. Although Pesach Rishon, the first Pesach he ate 15th of Nisan, he had no Torah obligation because he was a minor. Einsham Turi Evan, the Kunchis Achron, Avnim Luam, Hiksha Kane. I am Asher, there's Bar Leel. Okay. Now, this famous story with Sfirsa Omer. What's that look? You count the Omer and you miss a day. You're not able to count it along with a bracha, correct? Because it says you have to count full 49 days. So if you miss a day, you're not counting 49 days. What about a person started to count as a minor and he became bar mitzvah in the middle of the sphere? So that means the first 49, let's see, 25 days he counted, he had no Torah obligation. Going from the 26 onward, now he has an obligation. At the end of the days, he counted the full 49 days. He's not counting 49 days. Or do we say that since he counted as a minor, that's called counting? But it's not. So how do we understand it? Okay. So he wants to compare this to that. Friday night, he's a minor, he says Kiddush. He said the right words. Now, Shabbos morning, he reaches puberty. Gam kamon mitzvah Sfirsa Omer kosavnu bozer nira dal koponim chiv drabona poter chiv doraisa. But in orich vein kanukon, he says it's a lengthy discussion. It's not the place to talk about it. Poshuk shoyu shotem leil Shabbos. Poter legamri. Person was unstable. Friday night, he didn't take his medication. He's bipolar. Lo mahani masha kiddush. What he said, kiddush in that bipolar state has no value. And then he took his medication. He was stabilized during the day. He takes on a competent status. Torah. There's no question he has to say kiddush during the daytime. I'll call you. You can say kiddush anytime during Shabbos. Im kain mechuyev l'kadish biyom ein sham b'turi even. Yeah. See, the whole idea of somebody says it's not the place to talk about it. That we count Omer today, is that a rabbinical obligation, Torah obligation? If it's rabbinical, it makes it less complicated. He started to count rabbinically because of Chinuch, and he continues to count, even though it's not for the same reason. The first counting is Chinuch, because you have to educate the child. The counting, once he becomes an adult, you're counting because rabbinically you have to count. It has nothing to do with Chinuch. It's not to be accustomed how to count. So if that's the case, they're both rabbinical, but it's a different nature. There's one rabbinical law cover another. Or do we say no? Since in shades, it's a different shade of green, so to say. So it's not considered one continuous counting. But there's no question if the person was a child, which the counting rabbinically has no value, and the closing has value on a Torah level, then it's much more complicated. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here today. Okay, we're going to stop.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, Ron, be well. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 5:30. Yes, Aaron.
Thank you.
We're not going to
Rabbi.
have this
Thank you
next
very
week,
much.
right, Rebbe? The Rav will be away.
Yes.
But Mayor Simcha is saying the Daf Yomi, possibly.
Second. Yes, Mitzvah Hussein Daf Yomi. Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay.